A stunning and frightening assessment from the president's coronavirus response task force. We'll dive into those numbers, what it means for the weeks and months ahead. Plus, we know China lied, but to what extent and how bad is coronavirus in that nation? And who didn't tell us the truth about it here in this country, perhaps for fear of upsetting China? We'll get into that and more coming up.
The answer is yes. We need, as sobering a number as that is, we should be prepared for it. Is it going to be that much? I hope not. And I think the more we push on the mitigation, the less likelihood it would be that number. But as being realistic, we need to prepare ourselves that that is a possibility, that that's what we will see.
A very short period of time for that to happen.
Right.
Can the country handle that in such a short period of time, within a couple of months? 50,000 a month.
It will be difficult. I mean, no one is denying the fact that we are going through a very, very difficult time right now. I mean, we're seeing what's happening in New York. That is really, really tough. And if you extrapolate that to the nation, that will be really tough. But that's what it is, Jim, and we're going to have to be prepared for that.
Welcome to the Buck Sexton Show, everyone. Look, we're going to do what we always do. Deal with the facts as we know them to be. Try to speak the truth. Try to get to what really matters. There'll be no change in that during this period of quarantine, of national shutdown, of pandemic panic. We're going to keep doing what we do. The mission stays the same of this show, despite all of the challenges that are around us and the fear that is rising and the sense that the government has been playing catch up all along. We need to be honest with ourselves about how the response has been from government at all levels, what could have changed, what could have been different, because it matters for how we deal with this going forward. There you had Dr. Fauci telling us, and I looked at the slide as they released it, and it's pretty amazing when you think about how a week or two ago, the administration, we were told 15 days to stop the spread. 15 days to stop the spread, which led people to think, myself among them, that, all right, within 15 days, we'll get close enough to where we need to be on personal protective measures and all the equipment that we can begin some lessening of some of these, for the most essential, really just the economic measures. It's not going to change our social lives or anything like that. And that would come with some risk, but we would handle those risks and we would try to deal with this on a rolling basis. That was where the administration was a week or two ago. That changed, as I told you. On Sunday, they said we're going with lockdown until April 30th. And I remember thinking, how did we go from 15 days to another 30 days in the blink of an eye? What could they have learned? What could have changed so dramatically? And it's now this chart. The assessments that I had seen, you've seen assessments of total deaths from coronavirus in the United States over the course of the first wave of this pandemic. I had seen online, and look, there's a ton of stuff out there, anywhere from 50,000-ish, which is about what you'd see. That's a bad but mid-level bad flu season of additional casualties to what we have from the flu, all the way up to the absolute peak of 1% of all U.S. population, essentially, which would be between 2 and 3 million. Right. So that was the range we're working with. And in recent weeks, it had seemed like the administration, because we're doing all these measures, we're getting all this gear, we have some treatments that are not yet working, but we are hopeful will work, we would switch to a more state-by-state strategy, and we would get some of America back to work. That was the plan a week ago. I mean, the president with that line, let's not let the cure be worse than the disease. Well, what does that mean? It means let's not let the shutdown cause more devastation and destruction than the actual virus. We went from that a week ago to yesterday being told at this press conference, at the task force press conference, that we should expect 100,000 to 250,000 dead, even with this full-on draconian lockdown situation in effect in so many states now. Really all the most populous states. have some version of lockdown, stay-at-home orders. There's some differentiation, but we also all know that the CDC guidance is stay away from people, stay home, don't do anything if you can avoid it. And, oh, by the way, this virus is much more contagious, not quite as lethal as the initial assessments, but much more contagious and substantially lethal. And for the medical community, also more unpredictable than we had been led to believe. More unpredictable in the way that this disease would go. People think that their doctors have been anecdotally calling in and saying, telling different news stations and giving interviews where they say, I thought the patient was getting better, and then within a matter of hours was gone. That's what's keeping so many people on edge right now about this whole situation. We just don't know. We don't have good answers about so much of what's going on, and we're losing a lot of Americans now. I would note that the comparison that I'm seeing now about how we've lost more people to coronavirus than lost to 9/11. We lose more. I mean, I'm not a this is like the flu person. OK, I haven't been, but particularly now, I mean, this is worse than the flu. OK, it's worse than the flu as we're used to dealing with it. Obviously, the Spanish influenza pandemic was horrific, but we haven't dealt with anything like this in 100 years. We haven't seen anything like this in 100 years. This is a 100-year virus storm that we are going through. OK, but it feels like so much of this information that's coming forward from the government level is new. Why is it new? Shouldn't we have known this? And I will get into a lot of the rewriting of history now. From people are frantically rewriting history all over the media, saying that they knew, they saw it, and of course Trump's a moron. He didn't see it. This is what you're hearing from everybody. It's not true, and there's evidence. I mean, fortunately, you can look online. You know, I sit here and I start from the premise of initial, everyday honesty with you that this is worse than I expected. It is worse than I expected. And I'm here in New York City, very close to, in terms of physical distance, the worst of it. But also I know people that are dealing with this every day. And I'm dealing with it just as a person in the midst of the quarantine zone with the precautions. Every time I go out to get food, I can't get food delivered. People say have food. I can't get groceries delivered. It's been impossible. I got to go out. I got to get groceries. Every time you touch a button, forget about just touching. Now you walk into an elevator and you think, am I breathing in this virus? You think that wouldn't be the case, right? Because we had been told that this is about contact. This is about touch. And yet now they're saying maybe everybody should wear masks in public. Oh. Only how many weeks, how many months into this, and we're figuring out that what has been a much more widespread practice in Asia for years of people during the season wearing a face mask of some kind. Maybe that was better for us. My friends, we have been failed by the experts at every level on this. I'm here to tell you that. We've been failed by the media. We've been failed by journalists. We've been failed by epidemic task forces and the epidemiologists. Worst of all, we've been intentionally failed. Those were good faith errors for the most part, not with journalists necessarily, but with the other. The FDA is a slow, lumbering giant, does not move quickly. Same with the CDC. It's not that people there didn't want to help. Their organizational structure just wasn't up to it. China's shortcomings here are malicious. They're intentional, the Chinese Communist Party, and it's much worse than we had even thought before. So I will get into that today on the show. But I'm a little bit stunned by how much all of the people that are telling us to trust them now and do everything that they say, how much they have gotten wrong. And I will walk through that with you. And I can only base my assessments. I don't have a network of epidemiologists in Wuhan, China that I can speak to, or, I'm just going with what is reported on all of this all along. And we have been failed here by institutions. We need to understand that. And some of you, I'm sure, feel like institutions are failing us additionally by putting in place for all these different states these economic sanctions, effectively. I mean, these economic shutdowns in order to deal with this virus in a way that perhaps is not worth the long-term economic cost if certain states, certain counties that don't have a high level of virus took basic precautions, but also allowed there to be more commerce and more business underway, which would give people a greater sense of normalcy across the country. Although right now, if you even bring this up, you're a monster. As I've said, if you try to say we need to be looking at risk at every step of this, because if we make the wrong calls here, the devastation to the country overall, to our future, could become insurmountable. So this is a very important time in this nation's history, and yet we're being told, shut up, do what you're told. The experts know what they're doing. And I don't just mean the experts on health. I mean the economic experts, the government experts. They know what they're doing. I mean, Trump, they say, is a moron, but everybody else in the bureaucracy or the expert class, really, of economists, politicians, and some within the medical community, they say that they know what to do. Really? Well, let's get into some of that today. But before I go there, I also need to say, the motto of this show for now, I can't even count how many years, going on a decade, has been Shields High, a reference to the phalanx in ancient Greece, notably when I would talk about ancient Greek warfare, hoplite warfare, where you would have people in the phalanx with a hoplon shield. That's where the term hoplite comes from, a large round shield, and they would interlock their shields, and they would have to hold them at shoulder height, shields high. And that was how you fought, and that was how you not only defended yourself, but you defended the person next to you. The concept of phalanx, phalanx warfare and different iterations really continued throughout history for many, many centuries after ancient Greece. The ancient Romans used it, and then even later on, there was pike warfare or pike units that used very long spears, interlocking spears as a defense against cavalry charge. So conversation, perhaps that's history that I've been thinking about lately for another time. But we are in for a very, very difficult period here, and it's one that we did not get sufficient warning about. I don't have any masks in my home. You know why? Because I figured they're telling us not to take masks off the market because first responders need them. And now I'm looking around and people are saying increasingly, well, you probably should have some masks. Oh, so I listened to the experts, and now I'm one of the chumps that doesn't have a mask, it seems, right? I mean, this is the thought process. I'm not just talking about me. This is for everybody now. Oh, all right. Now we're in quarantine. So if this happened and you had, I don't have a second home. I barely have a home. But if you have some home in the country, a cabin in the woods, and you went to it, you're in much better shape now. We were told, don't worry about it. We were told by de Blasio here in New York, go out, go to crowds, spend money, go to restaurants. People have been top to bottom catastrophic with this. And I see so much finger pointing and running around. You did this and you did that. I follow the left and the right constantly all day long in media. Nobody really knew how bad this was going to be and what it would do to the country. No one with a platform big enough to influence the rest of the nation. There was so much focus. Yeah, they're saying it's bad, but it was always it's bad and Trump is the problem. And that made people tune out. Nobody was saying a month ago, hey, if this runs through the United States without anybody taking mitigation measures, it's going to kill 2 million people. Now, I know people have problems also. I've seen this with the modeling. Are they using New York as a baseline for the rest of the country? Because that would seem, from a statistical standpoint, to be very, very poor thinking. New York is the most crowded and largest metropolitan area in the United States, a place I know very, very well. I mean, I understand when you look at the spread of the disease here in the city, we are packed on top of each other. Walking on the street, I often brush up shoulders against people. That's how close you are here. Every day to strangers, hundreds and thousands of them all the time. You don't have that in most of the country. Even in a place like Washington, D.C., the streets are practically empty all the time compared to New York. The metro has far fewer people on it. It's a fraction. Right, so, and I mean, these are two places I've lived in. Now we're being told, a week ago it was, we might have to go back to work. We might have to make some trade-offs. And even Fauci was saying, we got to avoid a rebound, but and then all of a sudden they crunched the numbers. They said, nope, lockdown, or there's going to be so much death, it'll be overwhelming. And anybody who now looks at this and says, wait a second, why didn't we know about this weeks ago? They weren't able to do this modeling. Whew, my friends, this is a period of time where we have to do as much of our own thinking and be willing to question authority as much as we ever have. But first, we have to get ready for what is coming in the weeks ahead. I'll get to that.
I want every American to be prepared for the hard days that lie ahead. We're going to go through a very tough 2 weeks. And then hopefully, as the experts are predicting, as I think a lot of us are predicting after having studied it so hard, you're going to start seeing some real light at the end of the tunnel. But this is going to be a very painful, very, very painful 2 weeks.
A very, very painful 2 weeks. This is from the president, folks. He's seen all the projections now. He has been speaking with his team of experts in this field, and they've gone for maximum closure of the United States in response to what they've seen. Now, is this the right move? If they're correct, if we really are facing hundreds of thousands of dead, well, what other move, I guess, do you have? Anyone who says even relaxing this a little bit, the media, the libs, the left, and a lot of Republicans want to just chop your head off right away. How dare you? People are dying. Okay, that's fine. No one wants people to die. We also want the country to live, right? We also want there to be a society going forward, and that's where some of the tension is. That's what Trump talked about with the trade-offs. But nope, if we're really talking about hundreds of thousands of people, that's quite clear, isn't it? We're going to have this shutdown, and there's not going to really be any discussion about it. This is getting troubling as well because there's not going to be a discussion about civil liberties, about the Constitution, about what the government is able to do now. I took it as particularly ominous that former President Barack Obama brought up yesterday climate change. Really, right now, we've got news channels with body count tickers at the bottom of the screen, and you're going to talk about climate change now. Wow. Oh, but remember, what the appeal of climate change has been all along for the left is total domination and control of society with an existential hook to it. The world is at risk. You can't compete with the world is at risk. That's what they say. That's what they use against you. Well, now guess what? The world is, according to these calculations, at risk. It's at risk from the virus. It's at risk of economic collapse. Do you think that they're going to try to use that for their own expansion of power and authority? And are they really going to just give it back? To borrow from Gladiator, when Marcus Aurelius wants to hand over the keys to Rome, and then he's just going to give it back. Do you think that that's what the left is going to do now? Yeah, I don't think so. It's actually from Senator Gracchus, who says, so after Rome's all yours, you'll just give it back to the people. Tell me why, Maximus. Because that was a dying man's last wish, Maximus says. Gladiator is a great movie. If you're looking for a movie to escape all this nonsense, you really can't go wrong with Gladiator. So, that's just... I wish I could just turn on Gladiator these days and not have to think about all these things. But here we are, friends. We are in a very, very tough spot as a country. And even if this isn't affecting your area, your county, perhaps even your state all that much, because of what it's doing in other parts of the country, we're all dragged into this. We're all in the midst of dealing with this disaster, which just keeps getting worse. We really haven't gotten any good news in quite a while. And it is not confidence inspiring at all that a week ago it seemed like we were moving toward some restoration of economic activity. That's not normalcy. That's not, hey, let's throw house parties and forget and not protect vulnerable populations. But There seemed to be an elevated risk acceptance as a trade-off with economic activity. That's what we were talking about. That's what the administration was saying. And then it's just a complete about-face. And now the president ends up telling us things like this. He's telling us that this is going to be really tough. Play clip 6.
As a nation, we face a difficult few weeks as we approach that really important day when we're going to see things get better all of a sudden. And it's going to be like a burst of light. I really think and I hope our strength will be tested and our endurance will be tried. But America will answer with love and courage and ironclad resolve. This is the time for all Americans to come together and do our part.
This is the time for all Americans to come together and do our part. This is the time for all of us to try and rally and show our best selves. That much is true. Where did we go wrong, though, in the run-up to this? We are a country of unprecedented wealth. We are a country of unbelievable material capacity, instantaneous communication in everyone's hands. And we went in the span of a month from this won't be a big deal. And about the people that are saying that they knew, I mean, no one who had the attention of the nation a month ago was saying that this was going to shut down the country right now indefinitely. No one was saying that. All right, I all I do is watch and read and listen, and that was not the position. In fact, there were a lot of people who were taking the position even 3 weeks ago that this was nothing. This was nothing. I had people writing into me from the WOR show that I do here in New York City who were saying, you're sounding very negative right now. You shouldn't sound so negative. Well, if you're in New York and 3 weeks ago you thought I was sounding too negative, you probably think right now I don't sound negative enough. Things have gotten very, very bad here. So what do we do about all of this is a big question. Before I get too far down that pathway, I do want to start, though, with how did we get here? You know, we have a lot of time to think about this. We have a lot of just sitting around and not seeing family. I mean, I haven't been able to see my parents in weeks. You know, we have not been able to, we're not able to communicate in person with loved ones. Social life, that's a thing that doesn't really exist. I saw I will say, a pretty funny tweet from somebody. I don't remember who it was, but it was, I wish I developed a hobby other than going out to eat. That's how I feel too. You know, between going out to eat and reading, the problem with reading as your only hobby is I read all day for work. So then to read all day for work and then lie down and start reading even more on your own, it can feel a little bit like, is this all that I do? But I want to see how it is that we got to this point. You are and also then I'm going to have to deal with some of the lying that you're going to hear, because people view this as a fight for power and a fight for status in society in the media. That's what they're going to treat this as. It's used against the Trump administration clearly. I mean, this is the political thermonuclear weapon that the Democrats have been waiting for. They've tried to create other circumstances and, you know, tried to bring about a situation that would end the Trump presidency. If this goes bad, the Trump presidency is over. Unfortunately, if this goes really bad, and I'm not a catastrophist, and you know that I keep saying, well, be positive about this, but this could end more than just the Trump presidency if this goes really badly. We all should know that, at least. I feel like we all should be able to have adult conversations as a nation. It's very hard these days, because if you say things like, hey, so when we get through the other side of the curve, and we're probably still not going to have some drug that's a miracle for this, we're definitely not going to have a vaccine. So do we start relaxing some of these procedures then to allow more economic activity in, say, May or June or July? Is the person that gives that call then that says, okay, we're going to go back to work, America, at least in some places, in some ways, is that person going to be called a murderer? The answer is yes, if it's a Republican, by the way. The moment that somebody says, hey, okay, we've got to try a return to some normalcy here, they're telling you, oh, we'll get on the other side of the curve and we'll have more things under control and we'll have better, all this other stuff. Okay, sort of. We won't have to worry about overwhelmed hospitals, but unfortunately, the way this disease goes, for a lot of people, it's not like you get on a ventilator and that's a great treatment. That's a last-ditch effort to keep somebody alive. A lot of people pass away even though they're on the ventilator. So we're still taking risk. We're still taking risk to life and limb by opening up the economy. Is anyone going to be able to give that order without, meaning, hey, we're going to start going back to normal without being called a monster? Well, I can tell you this, any Republican, especially at the Trump administration, but any Republican governor, mayor, not a lot of Republican mayors running around for big cities, but who says, okay, let's try to open things up, they're committing political suicide and they know it. So that means it's very hard to have a reasonable discussion about any of this. How did we get to this point? The role of China cannot be overstated at this point when you look at the outbreak and the inability not just to contain it, but also to allow other people to prepare for it. Here's what I think really tipped the scale, because the projections, the scary projections about what's going on with the economy, what's going on with the death rate, never mind the economy. That's the way we're looking at this right now. The scary projections on death rate were weeks ago out there. And you had this Imperial College study, I think that was maybe 2 weeks ago. And that was the one that said that we had so many people that would possibly die in this country and in the UK. All right. But that was out there. And then even last week, the Trump administration was thinking about opening things up. And I figured, okay, well, they must see that we've got this mostly under control. We can take some additional risk. We got to get people back to work. And then the latest information was, oh, no, we can't do that. That's a horrible idea. A lot of people are at risk. A lot more people are at risk than was anticipated by that. So we are in full-on lockdown mode for another 30 days. That's a huge switch in 1 week. I mean, what does the government do? The government's just looking at this. Nobody cares about climate change. You know that we put out a bounty for the leader of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro? We put out a bounty on the guy. Like an Old West, bring him in, not dead or alive, but, bring him in as a narco trafficker. This guy's the president of Venezuela. I mean, people would say Guaido, but, Maduro's the leader of Venezuela. No one even noticed. How many of you even knew that? I mean, I read the news all day long, so I saw this, but I mean, have I even brought it up before now? We've put a bounty on the leader of a foreign head of state as a criminal, and no one even paid any attention to it. So what I'm saying is that the government is only really focused, or rather the vast bulk of government effort and attention is focused in on this problem. It's not like the possible death rate from COVID-19 would slip through the cracks. So what was the game changer here? What shifted the course of this such that we're now being told it's lockdown? And my friends, it's not locked down for 30 more days. It's locked down for at least another 60. I mean, if you look at the models, their trend doesn't really come down until July. So it's locked down for a long time. And we're all being told the economy will just flip right back on like a switch. The government will pay you, the economy will flip right back on. I don't believe that, but I also am getting sick of being told that just bringing that up as a concern means that you're basically a mass murderer. Okay, I mean, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I would like to think of ways that we could try to keep people alive and avoid a depression, but that now makes you a very, very bad person, according to the consensus narrative of journalists who are the dumbest and worst people in the world. But how did we get to this point where we would have such a massive shift in our thinking on this? China. The answer is China. Not what they have been telling us, what they haven't been telling us.
When you talk about could we have known something different, I think all of us, I was overseas when this happened in Africa. And I think when you looked at the China data originally and you said, oh, well, there's 80 million people or 20 million people in Wuhan and 80 million people in Hubei, and they come up with a number of 50,000, you start thinking of this more like SARS than you do this kind of global pandemic. I'll just be frank. That's when I looked at it, I was like, oh, well, this is not, if as close as those quarters are, So I think the medical community interpreted the Chinese data as that this was serious, but smaller than anyone expected, because I think probably we were missing significant amount of the data now that when we see what happened to Italy and we see what happened to Spain.
My friends, Chinese government lied about this, which had huge ramifications. Here's the top expert, one of the people that even liberals who are still deranged with their hatred of Trump and focus on that more than really anything else right now. Here's the top expert saying that she looked at this, she looked at the data, and it was her conclusion was wrong. So I'm here telling you that I also, based on what I was seeing and hearing, I thought that it would be like SARS as well. Not that I have the expertise that she does, but I thought it would be one of these moments where we have a respiratory scare. There'd be some cases here or there, but it would not be anything like we're dealing with now. And that shutting down the economy when this is happening would be, the cure would be worse than the disease, what the president said. But no, now we're actually looking at a disease that's far beyond, in terms of the losses and the casualties, what we thought even a week or two ago. How did that happen? Because now we start to have more information about what really happened in China. Because you have to remember, if the Chinese, with their very rapidly produced field hospitals on this matter and all the rest of it, and their lockdowns and everything, but China's a densely populated country of 1 billion people. And when you look at the numbers, they claim that they only had 2,500 deaths in Wuhan. 2,500 deaths. The real number, based upon, and this is where the data has been essentially smuggled out now, and this is how they're estimating this, there are 84 furnaces with a capacity over 24 hours of 1,560 urns citywide, assuming one cremation takes 1 hour. So they're looking at the cremation data from funeral homes. And when you do that, the number, and this is just in Wuhan, this isn't overall in the rest of China. When you do that, the death rate in Wuhan isn't 2,500, it's about 50,000. You're going up 20x what the Chinese government had been telling the world for weeks. If you tell me that we're facing something similar to the flu and will have about the same casualty rate, then it's possible to have a conversation about, well, how soon, how many weeks before we can, maybe we do this lockdown, let them get ahead. But if you're telling me that it's going to kill 20 times as many people as the flu, which is what we're now being told. If you're going to tell me it kills 20 times as many people as the flu, well, that's a dramatically different calculation. And we're just being presented with this now. My friends, it is April 1st. We are in April. The first U.S. case of this was January 15th. This has been dragging along for months. So when people tell you, and I've been saying this, just listen to the experts, everybody at every level of this has gotten some of it wrong, and most of the people with the greatest authority and the biggest megaphones have gotten it very wrong. Let's just get this out of our systems now. Let's just be clear about this. Because we want to make better decisions in the future. I want to make better decisions. I'm going to tell you the truth. I have been mercilessly on my own here, beating myself up because I feel like I should have seen this coming more and been able to tell all of you with greater certainty how bad this was going to be. I'm mad at myself because of this. And I know, Deborah Birx and the people that actually study this, I'm just some guy. I'm just some ex-Intel analyst who does a pretty damn good radio show. But I don't have any special insider expertise into the issue of pandemics, although I did read a book on pandemics a few years ago, which now everyone's talking about all the time, so I got that going for me. But no, honestly, though, I mean, I'm using a little bit of self-deprecation here to defray from what makes me mad at myself. But I'm angry that I didn't see this coming, and I can't imagine people in the U.S. government, top to bottom, aren't also angry, even though the information was bad, even though it's garbage in and garbage out. I should have seen this coming. They damn sure should have seen this coming. And I mean that in all the agencies, all the experts, every level of government. Failure, failure, failure.